Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Homespun Wife. My name is Sherry, and I am so glad that you are here today. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that we've discussed recently, and so many of you asked that I would speak about it again, and that is the subject of grief. I will go ahead and give you the disclaimer that I'm not a licensed psychologist or a therapist, but I have been a pastor's wife for over 40 years. And I have also experienced my own levels of grief. And while studying and praying and researching not only grief, but trauma, PTSD, and the healing process, I have found a lot of useful material that is helping me in my own life, and I hope that it will also help you. Just this weekend, I experienced a loss. At our previous church, one of the women there who had been battling cancer passed away. She was 59. She left behind several grandchildren and children and loved ones and a community that really admired her spunky spirit. She was definitely full of laughter and life, and she will be greatly missed. My husband kind of led in that funeral yesterday, and at the end of the service, one of her daughters stood up and talked about how her mother's one big regret was that she would never get to ring that bell at the end of her chemo treatment. She had received treatment and was awaiting word that she was in remission when they found another spot, and so she had to decide whether to continue chemo or not. She decided not to, and didn't feel like she could go through that anymore, and just decided to put her health in God's hands and enjoy the days that she had remaining. And she certainly did enjoy every moment of life. As we came in yesterday, we noticed that we were given these pretty silver bells with the blue ribbon on it. And so at the end of the service, the daughter asked us all to hold up these bells. And she called all the family members forward to the platform, and they all stood up, the little children, the older family members. And her daughter was holding a large bell that her mom used to ring at ball games. When her grandchildren would do something wonderful, I think she would ring that bell really loud. So they had that bell up there. And so she recounted for the congregation how at the end of the prayer, she hoped that everyone would participate in ringing our bells so that we could recognize her mother, who didn't get to ring that final bell there when she finished her chemo treatment. And so after my husband's prayer, we all began through the church to ring our bells. It was so powerful to hear that sound as we all remembered this sweet, dear friend that we had. I brought this bell home and I set it on my dresser as a reminder that life is precious and that grief is real. All of us experience grief at some time or other. So, does grief only have to do with death? As we discussed in our last video, grief is not only about death, it is about loss. And there are so many losses that we can experience as we go through life. It might be the loss of your marriage, and you never dreamed that you would be in a situation where you're getting a divorce. It may be years since you divorced, and yet you're still lamenting it and having heartache over it, and you don't really know what to call that feeling. You're being hard on yourself because you think you should be past it by now. That is grief. It could be the loss of a child who's turned away from you, won't call you or talk to you, maybe gone out into the world. As I've expressed, and many of you know my story, that I have a wayward child in his late 30s who has decided to completely abandon us and go out into the world and do his own thing, live however he chooses, and a lifestyle that is not that healthy on the streets. And that is something that I have to live with every day, and my husband has to live with every day. That is grief. It could be that you have suffered through infertility, longing and desiring to have a family, to be able to have fun Christmases and birthdays and raise a child, and yet that hasn't happened yet for you. That's grief. Perhaps you've suffered a miscarriage. There was life there, and then it was gone. And you just don't know how to talk about it. You don't want to bring it up because you think, people think I should be over that by now, and I'm not. How do I deal with that? That is grief. Perhaps you had a financial crisis and you lost everything. You lost your home, you lost your car, you've lost a job that you love, that you worked for, and you got laid off, and now you're at this stage in life where you know you probably will never be at that level again, and there is grief there from that loss. It could be losses that you experience from childhood. You look back on your childhood, maybe your grandparents, you never got to know them or have that warm experience of spending the night with them. Perhaps your parents were not there for you. You lived with aunts and uncles or different folks, and you look back on that and you regret that you did not get to have the childhood that so many maybe of your friends have had. It could be the loss of your health. You have been a healthy, vibrant person all of your life, and now something has happened. You either had an accident, you've been diagnosed with an illness, you are getting older, and you've had to maybe have a hip replacement or a knee replacement. Even though you're getting better, you know that you will never go back to being in the exact same health that you used to be in. You are becoming limited in movement or some other way, and you are grieving that loss because it is something that causes you heartache to let go of. You didn't have a choice in it. It just happened, and now you're left grieving it. It could be in some area of your life you have lost opportunity or freedom. I know under my last video, a very sweet lady there said, I love my mother-in-law very much, but she's older now and I'm her caretaker and I'm here 24/7. My husband can still go out to work and run errands and things, but pretty much I'm here all day, every day. I can't really even take a walk or get outside. I'm just here. I sort of feel stuck and I don't know what to call this. I hate to say that I resent it because I love my mother-in-law, but I just have lost this freedom in my life that I always look forward to having as I got older. That, my friends, is grief. So whatever kind of grief that you have gone through or still going through, then the best thing that you can do is to accept it, to speak it out loud, to recognize it for what it is. Why do we do that? Well, if we do not acknowledge our grief, then we never properly process it. And if we don't process it, we can't work our way through it and heal from it. And so it's very important that we recognize our grief. And so let's look at a few things that are what I would call facts about grief. One of the number one facts that I can tell you about grief is that you will never get over it. That's hard to hear. It seems like a shock for someone to say that. But friends, grief is not something we get over. It's something we go through. You have to go through grief. I wish it was so easy to just slip over it or slip around it or kind of run underneath it and have it behind us. But that's not how grief works. Grief is something that we have to accept and go through. That is the only way that we can process grief. Also, we have to recognize that you will never be the person you were before your loss. And that in itself is something to grieve. You will never be able to go back. That person is gone and can't come back. You will grieve for the person that you were, but she's gone, he's gone. We can look back on that person. We can love that person. We can appreciate the great things that happened to the people we used to be before we had the loss. But the loss is a real part of change, and it has changed us permanently. If my wayward son walked through the door today, I can't tell you the rejoicing that I would feel if I saw him whole and healthy and clean and sober, and I could just run and embrace him and hug him, and he could say, Mom, I'm home, I've gone through treatment, I've overcome these issues, I'm ready to start fresh. I would be so thrilled for that to happen. That would be like a dream come true. But it would never bring back the person I was before he left. She's gone. And accepting that is very important. It allows me to see that I'm not who I was. And I need to keep moving forward to become the best person I can be in my life. Grief isn't pretty. It's another thing we should remember. Grief is hard and it can be ugly. It can involve a lot of anger, moments of sobbing, despair, moments of denial when you almost refuse to acknowledge that it happened. Like, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm just going to push it out of my mind. But I will tell you from experience that it will come back into your mind. Sometimes it's late at night. Sometimes it's early in the morning. Or perhaps, like for me, I'm just driving down the road and I see someone standing on the side of the road that looks similar to my son. And I can actually go to the stop sign and feel, tears running down my face because it's in there. And as much as I would like to admit that I'm over it, I'm done, I've processed it, I've put it behind me, it will always be a part of me. Not to wear it like a badge of honor, but to accept that it's there and to say that it's okay. And what it took for me to get to the point where I could talk about it was years in between, and a lot of prayer and meditation and movement and other things that I have done to sort of work through the grief that I feel so that I can share from my heart the things I've gone through. And hopefully you can share with me what you've gone through, because grief never looks the same for any two people. We can go through the different stages of grief, and one day we may talk about the different stages of grief. There's 5 primary ones, but I've learned since that there's numerous others that we could break down, and we can talk about what those are. But it's not like a linear progression. It's not like, okay, I'm going to go from anger, I'm going to go to sadness, I'm going to go to depression, I'm going to go to acceptance. No, you're back and forth in the process of grief. It's not like you're merging along this one path. For you, grief will look one way, and for me, grief will look another way. And that's why we need to have compassion for one another when we see that grief is present. We need to be there and supportive and helpful, to pray and be available to our friends when they're going through things. We can assist and help the most that we can, but when you're the grieving person, you have to go through it on your own, the best way that you can. And don't be surprised if you feel like you've made a ton of progress, and then tomorrow is a day when you just kind of fall apart. That is perfectly acceptable, and lots of people go through that, so you're not alone. Don't expect your grieving process to look like anyone else's. It'll be a little bit different. You'll share some things in common with other people, and those who've also grieved can help you and support you. They can hear you out and they can understand you. But their process and yours will probably be different in its various stages, and that's okay. Remember that grief is something that we're moving through. It's not a place where we stay. Just because you're grieving right now heavily, you're not going to stay there. As you begin to talk about it and work through the grief that you have, you're going to find that you're moving along towards healing. You won't ever get over it, but you won't live there in that same spot forever. You will be making progress towards healing. And that's why I like to focus a lot on light and on my faith, on Jesus' light in my life, because his light is shining on me and giving me strength, giving me hope and help all along the way. So my faith has been a big part in helping me, and I'm sure that many of you would admit that it helps you too. Remember, we do go through grief. We're never the same after grief. We can't go around it. We have to work through it. But we don't have to stay in the worst of it forever. We will come out on the other side in a place of healing. Now, healing doesn't mean that the grief goes away. It's there. It's always going to be there. It just means that you have learned how to cope with it, how to accept the feelings and emotions that you have as they come. You've learned a lot from all you've been through in the steps that you followed. And here on this side of the healing process, you are seeing things much more clearly, and you are able to live with grief in your past. You're able to make the most of your days now, instead of hoping that you can just get out from under it. You're going to recognize that grief is there. It's changed us, but our new selves can be good and wonderful too. The last part that we need to remember is that there is always hope, and things will always get better when we are moving towards healing. Things will get better. Some days they'll be dark. Some days they'll be hard. Some days we'll cry or be angry. You may have been years since the thing happened that was your loss. You may think that is far away from me now, and you'll have a day when it'll just pop up. Accept it. Think about it, pray about it, meditate. Recognize that grief is with you forever, but not at the same level of intensity. It will diminish in the frequency and intensity at which it comes upon you. Things will get better, but it will take time. Give yourself time and grace. Be kind to you. Let yourself have moments where you can actively grieve and then say, you know what, I'm going to get up from here now. I'm going to dry these tears. I'm going to stop this wallowing. I'm going to get up. I'm going to do something productive. In the next video that I talk to you about grief, I'm hoping to share with you some coping mechanisms that you can use to help you as you work your way through grief. There are lots of things. I have a long list written out of different things that we can do that actually can help with our grief. If you are a person who's grieving, it helps to know that you are not alone. Whatever you are experiencing, the Lord sees and knows. He loves you and He's with you. It's okay to talk about whatever it is that you have lost. Eventually, everyone will go through difficulty and loss and grief. We will never be the same, and that's okay. It's okay to grieve, to go through grief, but take away from it the best things possible. The wonderful memories, even if they hurt sometimes, the sweet moments that you shared, and the acceptance that life goes on, and while we're here, let's give it our all. Let's embrace it and be grateful. My friend would tell me, make every day count. Live every day to the full. And if you get the opportunity, ring the bell. I love you, friends, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye-bye.